At Key Creative, teamwork makes the dream work. Join Lisa and Emily as they share how combining their backgrounds in occupational therapy and speech therapy can create amazing outcomes with families. Stay tuned. It's time for Key Talks. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for coming to listen to us today or watch us today. We're in video and audio formats. My name is Deanna Halls, and I'm the Communications Director of Key Creative and co-host of Key Talks, which you're listening to right now. Now, if you're watching, across the table from me is my co-host, Paula Audrey Rivero, COO of Key Creative and fellow co-host. Anything else you'd want to?
COO, like to refer to it as creator of outstanding opportunities, a little play off of the Chief Operating Officer. Add that to it.
And to my left here is Michael Schweik, our Chief Technical Officer and the creator of all the microphones and cameras in front of me. Well, a very elaborate setup.
Not really the creator. We've got Canon, Samsung, Logitech, Rode, yeah. But and I'm trying to think, like with CTO, I can't even think of a cool acronym for that, but we're gonna have to workshop that.
Well, you can work on that. Yeah,
something
I
this
was
season.
actually workshopping mine. Maybe it should be cheerleader of. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I don't know.
Now, if
not,
you don't,
not for today's episode. Sorry, Deanna.
That's okay.
Let's get back.
If you don't know who we are Key Creative. We are a pediatric rehab med practice based in Edmonton, Alberta. We are all about success coaching for all abilities, and that is all abilities. That can be different kinds, like neurodivergence, disabilities, developmental disorders, difficult life circumstances, to put it very lightly.
Yeah, like mental health, trauma. We work a lot with children's services. We work a lot with family support for children with disabilities, the Alberta education. So we kind of dip ourselves wherever someone needs support or help or wants to create or celebrate their awesome.
And the fun part is when you say wherever, like we say Edmonton, but kind of through the magic of technology it's really everywhere, because, we want to, part of our vision is providing those services for wherever people are, meet them where they're at. And that's kind of what we do with Key Talks.
And in episode 1, we talk a little bit more about how we are also a rural practice. So anywhere, yes, virtually, but also our coaches and our team are on the road every day traveling to different communities around Edmonton. So whether they're going to Cold Lake or Lac La Biche or Bonnyville,
Whitecourt, Three Hills,
I was in Clyde,
Onion Lake.
Yeah, you name it. We're all around. And I'm excited today because we're talking about the value and importance of a team and how important it is to collaborate. And so we have 2 awesome coaches representing occupational therapy and speech language pathology joining us today to talk about team and collaboration.
So today's guests are going to be, I'll say Emily and Lisa, Emily Lepski and Lisa Fedorchuk. Lisa was in her own episode of, I forget what number it was.
It might have been episode 3.
Okay.
Yes, episode 3, and she was talking about the different books she uses in her practice,
and how to use the books,
and how to use the books. And I will tell you, there is one in particular. I'm gonna give it a shout out because I've used it so much. Okay, The Magical Yet. Has been such a great book that I've been using a lot with my clients since that episode. So yeah, I was really grateful and loved learning from her in that episode. And we get her back.
Yeah. Yay! All right. So without further delay, Emily, Lisa.
Woo! Tag team back again. Check and direct. Oh no, we can't sing songs.
That was less than 3 seconds, so I think we're good.
Less than 3 seconds. We can do whoop. There it is. All right. Taking it back to the old school. Okay.
Hello.
Only me.
Hello.
So yeah, we're super excited to have you both here. I was just sharing that today's episode is the value and importance of a team and collaboration. So we're so happy that you guys will join us and share a little bit more from your perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. And how many of us are in Key Creative right now?
23.
Nice.
I feel like I want to double count that, but 23, and that's made up of occupational therapists, speech language pathologists. We have our awesome Trent Magic, Trent Magus, but we call him Magic, representing physical therapy. And then we have an awesome admin management team. Mike, Deanna, myself, Jessa. Yeah. So 23 of us in total. Yeah.
Nice. All right. So either you can take it away, however you'd like to start. You can reintroduce yourselves as well. And wherever you want to start with how teamwork makes the dream work.
Teamwork does make the dream work. I'm Emily Lepski. I'm a speech language pathologist. And this?
I am Lisa Fedorchuk, occupational therapist. Emily and I, we've been working together, I think, starting in 2020, January 2020.
Oh my gosh, it's been 4 years, almost 4 years. Yeah. Amazing.
So we've had a variety of teams together, from littles to teenagers and school setting, home setting, and everything in between. So it's been awesome.
And I know you two were really excited to come on and talk about, well, what we were kind of just like interdisciplinary practice, but really like the value of working on a team and how valuable you found being able to collaborate with other professionals, especially when you're working with different clients that have complex needs. Would that be fair to say? So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what it looks like to work on a team and what that's been like for you two.
Yeah, sure. I think one of the major things I've learned as an SLP in this practice is that our jobs there's so much overlap between SLP and OT and PT, but definitely SLP OT. We do a lot of joint visits together. And something I always talk about to the OTs is, in my education, I never once heard the word regulation and how that's such a huge part of our practice. And so without being able to work alongside the OTs, I would really know very, very minimal about that area and how much that impacts a session's flow and what I do and my interventions. So yeah, I think that's something that's so powerful, is having that resource right there in person to work alongside.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, everything that Emily said. And I think that going back to the theme of teamwork is there's like teamwork in the sense of more micro, like between, let's say, the two of us.
Yes.
Or let's say there's three of us on a team with PT as well. But then also that macro team of just us of a whole company and that collective. There's just so many areas that we're able to bounce ideas off of each other, and just really it helps us serve the families as best as we can.
So like Key Creative is a multidisciplinary team in the way that we employ, and our team is made up of multiple different professions. And so, but what we're talking about today is something a little bit different than just that multidisciplinary approach, because you can have multiple different professionals going in and supporting a child, but if they're not collaborating, it sounds like, Emily, just from what you're saying, if they're not collaborating, say, with the other professionals on the team, there perhaps could be a gap, or maybe it's not as an effective approach if you don't have the right information or lens there. Is that something you could speak a little bit more about?
Absolutely. I think something that's super important is each child has kind of their optimal learning zone when they're ready to be learning. And sometimes we have to focus on getting the child there. So with language, we know that, the child needs to be in a zone where they can learn. They can be able to decipher pictures or process language. And if they're not there, if they're dysregulated or they're not engaging or they're not connecting, then we really have to pull ourselves back and think about how are we going to get to that level. And that's where working alongside an OT, that's their scope, that's their specialty. So sometimes, you know, I could come with this elaborate plan and all these toys and visuals, and we don't get to that because that's not where the child's at. And so I need to pull in that perspective of the OT and work with them and say, hey, you know what can we do instead? Let's put this language activity to the side. How can we both work with this child to get them to be engaged with us, to connect with us?
To be in a place where they can actually learn the strategy that you're implementing.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, and so a lot of times the professional will go out on their own, but I know in our practice, a lot of times you will go out together. And so that's where I hear and know that you get that value, that you have your teammate there with you, Lisa, for example, or an occupational therapist who's able to support bridging that gap from getting to the regulation and then moving into the learning that maybe the SLP is going to implement. So, yeah, tell us what makes collaboration. So we talked about the team, but what is actually happening in the collaboration part of the practice?
Yeah, so I think collaboration, it can also vary a lot just from team to team, right? We're really able to kind of feed off of how each other best operates in a way. And so sometimes that looks like we're texting each other or emailing or scheduling a phone call or a meeting so we can chat about, hey, let's try to problem solve this so that we're not just approaching it just from my OT lens or just from the SLP lens. Okay, what are all the factors that are overlapping? An example, let's say with the overarching term of like behavior, right? Like behavior is communicating something. It's regulation. It's so many things. And if we just operate in our own little bubble, we're not going to be able to benefit the child and the family as a whole. Sometimes that collaboration is taking place directly right in person in that visit of like, oh, I noticed this one thing, or it'll be the SLP saying, hey, let's try to reframe language or phrase something like this so that the message can be sent across most effectively based on the kid's language style. So it really happens all across the board, real time and behind the scenes.
And collaboration is one of our 4 C's. And so people probably don't know what that is, but in our practice, we have something called the 4 C's to create your awesome. And it's a framework that we work from. So we know as coaches, clinicians, team members that whenever we're supporting, coaching, working with someone, we're coming from that 4C framework, which is collaborate. Not, and that, I mean, it's put as number 1, but they all you can mix them up and approach in different ways, but collaborate, create, coach, and celebrate. But collaboration being kind of the essential ingredient to kind of getting to the next C's in the model, especially when you're working with someone who needs an interdisciplinary approach, right? So I'm going to throw this in there. I know we kind of talked before whether we wanted to go into this, but I think let's maybe mix it in. So transdisciplinary is another word that's out there, and the way that I have used it, which someone can correct me if I'm wrong, and we couldn't quite see it, but I have often used it in the way that we have an SLP or we have an OT, but I'll use Emily for example. So we have Emily, she's an SLP, and she can provide a transdisciplinary approach, meaning now with her experience, she has some knowledge in regulation, and she has some knowledge maybe in interoception, which I would love for you guys to speak a little bit more on. But she's not trained or doesn't have that level of expertise that Lisa would have. So we often hear in practice that Emily may come in with a transdisciplinary approach, and that can have value, but maybe tell me why that's not as valuable as having an interdisciplinary approach. This is how I'm going to term it, where you're working with the other professional to provide the value versus the SLP trying to put on an OT and SLP hat at the same time. you're saying, you know what, yes, I have some of that knowledge, but the true value comes from working with my teammate who is the OT. Does that make sense? Because I feel like a lot of people say, I can come in, I'm transdisciplinary, I have knowledge in this, but are they getting the full value of an OT if they're an SLP?
I think that something that's super powerful is, being able to be confident enough to talk to a parent and say, I'm not really clear on that, but I'm going to go talk to the occupational therapist. That might fall more into their role, because a lot of times certain families or certain people, they don't really know where a certain behavior or a certain characteristic might fall under it. Is that an SLP thing? Is that an OT thing? Or is it both? And what we find is a lot of them do overlap. So being able to say, I'm confident in I could provide you with this language lens, but I think there's a missing piece. And I want to talk to the OTs and be able to kind of get their perspective, get an ability to brainstorm and problem solve with someone else who might have something more valuable or just different to add.
Yeah, and I think for me,
thank you, Emily. Yeah,
I think for me, the terminology of like multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary is more kind of clear in my brain. So multidisciplinary to me meaning, okay, well, different people have their different scopes or different roles, and that's what they can lend to a solution. But with interdisciplinary practice, we're really honoring that overlap and that collaboration to together creating that solution.
Yes.
Which I think is so powerful and so much more meaningful to the family and to create change. So an example, let's say with toileting. Toileting can often just fall within the scope of OT. Because it's kind of a activity of daily living, it's that independence, etc. But if a child doesn't understand maybe the expectations, right? That's definitely overlapping with SLP, right? Like how can we communicate the expectations or the information or the context or the why behind things? Maybe it relates to urge awareness and having the awareness of sensation and the ability to recognize and describe like what does it feel like when I have to pee, right? We take a lot of those things for granted. And if we're just coming at it from just, okay, we just have to do sitting practice on the toilet every single day, that's not going to fully support the child.
It sounds like you're missing a piece of the learning that they need to be able to do the skill that you're teaching them.
Totally.
And that piece might lend itself to needing an SLP, for example. Yeah. So I just want to, I want to ask this in a different way, because what I find is that there are, and that I have seen or heard like professionals going in and that may be an OT and they're providing SLP type of supports. And I think like the important piece that I want to bring in, what I'm hearing is that honoring that each discipline has such an important value and expertise that can't be just transferred onto one professional, that the value of having the SLP and their knowledge bank and the OT and their knowledge bank is such a key piece in really meeting the child's needs. And so cautioning, I mean, maybe this is a cautioning of like professionals going in and trying to wear too many hats at once. And I think that's what I love about our practice, is that we do come in there as a team. We collaborate as a team. We work together to really find out what is going on, and then we honor each discipline. Because let's be honest, you guys each have a full knowledge bank of educate and time and education that you've put in to know what you're doing, right? Like to hone your skills in these areas. And I think really honoring that is so important. And what I've also learned is that if we don't do that, we may miss the very piece that is the key element for that child learning how to potty train, right? So tell me if this would work, because I know we were talking a little bit about interoception, how that can be an overlap. And there was another one that you also mentioned that tends to be an overlap. But what I'm wondering is if you could give an example of why having both of you there is so important in helping that child. And you've spoken to it a little bit, but just now with that added context, just how key it is in supporting that child or that family.
Totally. I think interoception has been something that's changed my practice tremendously. And it's created by an OT, Kelly Maher, I believe, right?
Dr. Kelly Mahler, I think, has really brought it to light. She's done a lot of research, but she's an OT by trade, but definite overlap.
Okay. So yeah, OT by trade, and this is an evidence-based program. But the way I see it is for us to understand, and interoception is, and the way I'm going to describe it is really bringing awareness and understanding to some of the sensations our body is experiencing. And so there's so much language around that. And a lot of it is descriptive language. So when we think about potty training, when I take it from a SLP lens, a language lens, I think, does the child understand the difference between wet and dry? And can we really dig deeper and do some sensory and play-based activities to show that they understand the difference between wet and dry and how that plays a role in, oh, I can feel my diaper is wet. Are they able to follow a direction, like pull up your pants, pull down your pants? Do they understand those small pieces of language, like the prepositions and the action words? So I think of it as it's really nice to work with an OT in that area, because we're able to, I'm able to provide that lens of, does the child understand these concepts, and how can we work on those strategies to get them there? Along with, it's very heavily involved with our body. Do they understand body parts, different categories, things like that? So I think it's really shaped my practice, and it's something I work on almost every visit because I find it super valuable to be able to read our body cues. It's so important.
Yeah, and just to expand on that too, not only interoception benefiting toileting as the example that we're talking about, but emotional awareness, right? Like, how do you know that you're feeling frustrated versus angry, right? Like our kids that reportedly go from 0 to 100, is it because they don't have a way to communicate and advocate that, like, hey, I'm struggling, or I just need more time with this, or I just need a minute? Or is it that those signals are so small and they really need some support with that vocabulary and awareness of sensations to know, oh, maybe I feel butterflies in my tummy when I'm getting anxious versus my muscles getting tighter, my face feeling scrunched up when I'm getting escalating even more.
Okay, thank you for sharing. The other piece you guys talked about that I'm also thinking about is just the logistical piece of then, like, having another team member there to collaborate with you in a visit. Could you speak a little bit more about that?
Sure. Sometimes our philosophy here is we really also want to focus on parent coaching and how important that is, because, we're not in there every single day, and what's going to make a difference is if the parent can be able to implement these strategies and in different environments. So sometimes, right, especially when you have the little kids and you're bringing in toys and you're a fun new person, you kind of get all their attention, and you don't have that opportunity to maybe chat with the parent as often as you'd like. So having two people in the visit's kind of nice because you can balance that. You can work one-on-one with the child direct, focus on some of those strategies in the moment, and then save your parent coaching towards the end and flip-flop. And it's been super valuable to me to be able to kind of have that balance in a visit as well.
Because I think, what I know about our practice is that the parent or caregiver's involvement in the learning is just as important, if not more, I would argue, than the child's learning and involvement. And so what I'm hearing, being able to have that time, that attentive, present time with each one has so much value. And to be able to do that can be difficult if you are on your own, right? And what I love is that you each get your own time with the caregiver and then with the child, and you really are kind of I keep coming into my head, tag team.
Same, tag team.
Whoop, there it is. Whoop, there it is. You're in. Tag team. And you're switching it up and you're getting in there and you're really, and through that, you're able to create, right? Like create on a different level and also just have a different level of attunement, right? I know lately I've been working with my clients and it's been more solo. And so to have the value of someone else where I can really then be attuned with one person at a time is so, so important. Deanna, is there anything you want to add?
I'm just trying to think of, I mean, you don't have to bring up, and for confidentiality, you don't need to bring up any specific parent names or anything, but can you think of any visits where there were like siblings there too, or both parents were present, that kind of thing, where maybe someone needs to be taken aside for a bit of a chat or consultation or this or that, or same thing where, some families may only be visited once a week or twice a month or once a month. So having that also that piece where even if you're not physically there after that visit, that you're still available to be collaborated with by text or by phone call, especially when Alberta roads get too dangerous for you to physically get there, because that is another obstacle our practice faces from time to time. And I'll explain to them, we'll try to reuse that time to collaborate in another way, in another medium as best as we can too. But I do remember shadowing in my early years where there's actually two other siblings here. So my job is to focus on engaging those younger siblings while, Lisa, Emily, you two can focus on this kid or focus on this parent and just kind of getting that out of the room. Or maybe I can debrief with you, be like, when we were separated, this sister had this to say. And I don't know if she said that to you yet. Those kinds of fun insights. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it just gives a little bit more opportunity to be vulnerable too. Of course, there's going to be stigma layered in everything. Parenting can be a really big one too. So sometimes families feel like they have to be on top of their kid, and the kid has to have be on their best behavior. And we want to see all of it, right? That's why we're there. So sometimes when we can have that kind of that swap time too, we're able to share with the parent afterwards saying, hey, so we tried this and it worked out like this. And it can give them permission to lean into some of the strategies too. And they don't feel like they have to be on top of their kid all the time.
Yes. Yeah.
So that can definitely be a benefit.
They can kind of put that, I like how that vulnerability, they can put their guard down a little bit, be vulnerable, and they know their child is in a safe place, learning and growing, or just having fun, right? Sometimes and at the end of the day, that's probably the most important. Just having fun and playing with someone who's there who cares, right? So,
and also one other thing that came to mind is it can be such a great learning opportunity too. If let's say doing something with the kiddo, and it's okay, let's go tell mom, or let's go tell dad, or let's go tell grandma what you learned. And it's an immediate opportunity for the child to paraphrase and reteach their mom or their dad or their family member of, oh, I learned this. And it's so much more powerful for their own learning.
For their learning. And then I'm also thinking just the spotlighting of it. So the praise of it also is a form of reinforcement too. So you're kind of dipping in multiple ways in doing that, which is so great. Yeah.
Yeah. So Deanna, I know you'd brought up frequency of visits. And I think that's something that we've noticed in our practice, that sometimes we're only able to see a family once a month or twice a month, like you said, and they have a lot on their plates, right? Some of these families, parents are working a couple different jobs, time is very limited, siblings, all that sort of stuff. And so for us to be able to come in together as a joint visit really helps to meet the family's needs, because their time is so limited and capacity can be more challenging to be in that ideal state. So coming together can really support the families too.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not an OT or SLP or PT myself. My background is human ecology, but back when I used to shadow visits, I found that I was kind of in that family capacity piece. So sometimes there'd be visits where it's our very first or maybe second time ever, and I will just take time to like look at family photos, look at what's tacked onto the fridge, and what are these small little artifacts of a family's life that can just inform me. Like, oh, I see library books on the bottom. Okay, they access the library in their community. Sweet. Maybe there's resources there, so they don't have to be $16.99 out of another book on their shelf that we can borrow and that kind of stuff. I'm trying to think where I was going from here about what was it, family,
the frequency,
frequency. Yeah. So sometimes, like I used to facilitate triple P as well, and maybe a paper worksheet wasn't filled out. So instead of being like, oh, darn, this family, they didn't fill out a worksheet again, I'm just like, is there an easier way for me to facilitate this for you? Is it better that we don't do this? Like, maybe I'll just do something wrote in person with you with our hands instead of just write. Can you write 7 examples of this? Like, like that it's so archaic to me at this point. Worksheets. I try not to do those as much as possible.
You know what I'm hearing though, Deanna?
Yeah.
Is a few things. And thank you, Lisa, for sharing about people have busy lives. To book in 1, 2, 3, 4 extra visit. Well, maybe that's excessive, but 1, 2, 3 extra visits in a week is challenging, right? So just logistically speaking, the tag teaming and going in together has value in that way beyond just like the clinical therapeutic lens and adding value in that way. And then Deanna, like what you said in terms of just your human ecology perspective, like to come in and just have this greater scope of the space and like the value of different pieces of information and how they can inform you on how you connect, relate, and talk with the family has so much value. So I love that we have a human ecologist lens and that you're our first contact point with all of our families. So we've talked a lot about the micro aspect of collaboration with the client, the team members, but we have a whole macro aspect of collaboration. And Deanna's actually our first point of contact with families, and she does the intake.
Yeah. So I don't want to sound salesy here, but if you're trying to access our services, go to our website, keycreative.com, where you fill out an intake form.
That's keycreative.com.
That's QIcreative.com. Yeah. And that is basically our beginning funnel point. This is where you share your family situation, any diagnoses, any challenges, any strengths, and what they like too. Because that's usually the first question I ask when I do my intakes is, what are Paula's strengths? What does she like the most about life? And we go from there. And I think that's really perspective changing. But if I can draw back to that intake form, I get all sorts of nuggets of things all the time, of things that they like or things that they're having trouble with, or these different elements in isolation of they notice that there's potty training challenges. They notice that there's feeding challenges. They notice that they have in AAC, in a tablet that has something like Proloquo to Go. That's an app that can be used. But they don't quite have the categories locked in yet, or they may not understand that this is an OT thing, this is a speech thing. Because there's a lot of families who maybe they just got approved for social funding, and this is a completely new jungle for them, and maybe they've never heard what a speech language pathologist is in their life. Like, what is this job title and how are they supposed to help my family out, right?
and I think that's such an ongoing thing too. Like, even people who have experience with child development, I know Emily has shared with me before, let's say in a school setting of a child just receiving SLP supports, maybe someone at the school being, I think Emily asked, well, do they have an OT as well? Is there OT referral? I'm like, oh no, they don't have any OT needs. And Emily, if you want to.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just kind of a misunderstanding or just maybe a lack of understanding that, certain things fall in certain categories.
Yes. And I would say just like myself, even not being an OT or SLP, and I mean, I've worked in the profession enough to understand it, but taking myself out of that, like I would be like, well, why do I need an SLP? Like, this is toileting. Like, why aren't they going? But when you describe just like understanding
wet and dry,
or even being able to commute, you know, like maybe they don't know how to express that. Like, those I think are small things that most people, and I'll just like myself, will often have oversight on, like will not acknowledge or even know to acknowledge, right? Because we don't have the information. And I think that's ultimately what I was getting at earlier too, is that we may think we know as a professional in a certain area, but we only know what we know, right? So until we have a different perspective or lens, we only have a certain piece of information.
And I think that's where the macro piece really comes in. That's nice of having Deanna as one of the first points of contact with the family. You're able to explain it a little bit better. So I'm curious, like, how do you really emphasize that power of collaboration we have at Key Creative?
Oh man, that's
it's a deep question.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Other than like this, like intrinsic that we collaborate, we create, we coach, we celebrate. Like in my grad school experience in communication, a professor told me once that communication is the opposite of war, right? And that there's just and that can come in so many different mediums, like of information being passed along from one or the other. But that's so huge.
That's huge.
It's
huge. A big statement. Yeah.
And sometimes, like when I'm in these conversations on the phone doing an intake interview, like I want to listen and learn from parents and caregivers as much as I'm trying to impart who we are, because we want to make sure that we're a fit for you as much as you're a fit for us too, right? Because you may be coming into our services for as little as a few months to as long as several years, and that can in some cases integrate us into being a part of your village, right? That's huge. And when, my coworkers are visiting families, homes, and schools, that's huge. That's vulnerable too. And so I just want to establish that feeling of almost safety on the phone, because actually I've had other different notes where families have been through, like on the background of their child's diagnosis, maybe there's family stress going on. Maybe there's like grades aren't doing that well at school, or parents are at their limits, or parents are separated, or they have separated. And stuff like that. And maybe the paperwork just says separated, but I don't know that there's like a big legal mountain behind that is also going to take the parents' bandwidth and capacity. So I'm just trying to make sure that that you feel heard, that you feel safe there too, and that these categories that you maybe have heard about for the first time are maybe Lisa's purview or Emily's purview, or together they could knock it out of the park as we get to know. And that our services, too, are not just in isolation, taking you to the kitchen for 90 minutes and I give you a worksheet and I leave. Like, not at all. When I think of the macro, too, not to sound salesy again, but we do also collaborate as all of us, too, where we bring up specific, like, caseloads and like having all those other eyes and ears together to work on things like that.
Big brain energy.
Big brain energy.
Yeah.
Oh, Deanna, thank you for sharing that. I mean, I know you're the right person for the intake process, and I feel so grateful that the people who approach Key Creative get to speak with you first, because I think you set the tone for exactly what everyone else brings too, is bringing that listening ear, hearing people and making them feel safe. And I think that's the foundation of creating relationship. And then with that relationship, magic can happen, but it's really that relationship first. So thank you for being that first person to set that tone of who we are and how we do it. That then I feel, everyone on our team is so amazing, surprising, beautiful, and powerful and awesome. That just then continues. And that form of collaboration just expands through that.
If I was the only person that could do that, I would be the only person sitting here. I want.
Well, and I think there's a really big theme there too of families or others who we support feeling like we have their backs. I think it's something like we've heard directly, which is huge.
Yeah.
And really, really means a lot to us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like that initial step of creating that sense of felt safety of like, I believe you. I believe your struggles, right? With that initial intake. And we got your back. And as that advocacy moves forward too, whether we're advocating for a family for services or school versus home dynamic, all these sort of components, it's having their back and being able to do that as a united front is huge, because it's not just one person saying, I believe you. It's, I believe you. I believe you. I believe you.
I believe
you.
you.
I believe you. And it's huge.
I mean, I believe you, I support you, and I will advocate with you.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like that's something we do so well as a team. And then I also then think of Mike, for example. So another huge collaborator that is a big piece of our puzzle, right? That comes into play. I'm wondering if you have examples, or Mike, maybe you can bring an example of how people with their clients have come to you with something.
Well, I can talk about the technology aspect, like coming in at key coaching and stuff like that. There's a lot of
Mike, what is key coaching key?
Well, it's an opportunity for our practice to kind of come together and share our different modalities. Cause like, I think one of the most, big things in rehab med and in kind of like that caretaker profession of helping each other is it's really easy to get burnt out. It's really easy to feel that fatigue of being on your own island and not having supports. That's exactly what our families feel. And so the reality is having a way that we can come together to kind of like, give that self-reflective practice, be able to share information, share all the things that we have. And like, yeah, I can say technology side of it, but like, I'm thinking back of Deanna talking about being in the homes, and, I've done triple P myself. But also we have a lot of former teachers who are on the team or have been on the team. And so like sharing that perspective for our various professions for like, when they are in the schools and stuff like that, that those are things that, allow us to better connect, better, gain those perspectives in a really effective manner and have that communication. So it's not war. So it is collaborative and something that uses all of our best talents.
Yeah.
I think something too we haven't touched on is we talk a lot about capacity and really seeing and bringing awareness to capacity. And also as therapists, we're human and we have a capacity too. So something that's nice of having that team approach is you can really see when someone else needs to be lifted up, or you can match someone's energy, whether that be at a group meeting or in a session. And that's something that's I found super powerful too of, some days are going to be harder. You're going to maybe not have the best sleep before, but then you get around the other people and your energy level is so impacted by the people you surround yourself with. And I think that's a huge strength of Key Creative.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you also, Mike, for that added. And in line with that, Emily, I agree. I feel like what I admire most about our practice, or just as a person in our practice, is the level of respect that each person has for the other. And like respect, meaning again, just giving everyone the space and time to share their perspective, their opinion, their feedback, and each person will value it and hear it and make them feel safe to share whatever they want to share. So yeah, just the level of respect that's created in our culture, I think is so beautiful, and then lends its hand to effective collaboration, right?
Yeah, and then we can treat the families and the child holistically.
Yes.
Because we're so influenced by everyone, and there's not really a dumb question. I feel like here, like if I'm struggling in tech, I have Mike to go to, or Deanna and Lisa and Paula, right? I have you guys to go ask these questions and make myself a better therapist because of that collaboration piece.
Thanks for sharing that. It's awesome.
So I think I'll speak on behalf of both Emily and I that we're really grateful to Paula and Deanna and Mike for being able to bring up this topic, because it's so huge, that collaboration piece and that teamwork, both from that micro level and the macro level, like we've talked about, of sharing knowledge and doing the best for our families that we can and meeting them where they're at and really maximizing everything we can. So thank you for, bringing up this topic.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, and
It's
so
been fun.
the way we close out our, well, also our meetings too, let's be clear, that too, but also Key Talks is our whoosh. So
Whooshing it out.
yeah, whooshing it out. So we start with our fists. Mike does it as like potatoes, fries, potatoes. You reach forward, you like split your fingers out.
You
and
could
then,
do some jazz hands.
You could do some jazz
Spare
hands,
them
yeah.
here.
And then back towards your chest with fists. And we also do a whoosh at the same time. Yeah?
I like to call it a
is it the other way?
We suck it in.
I think it's potatoes out.
No, wait.
No,
Oh man, what?
Oh yeah, it's
no, so potato, fry, potato.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
whoosh out.
Okay.
I think you did the opposite.
Oh, yeah. So
Deanna, how long have you been here?
Okay, so
We got
ready. In 3, 2, 1, whoosh it out. 3, 2, 1, whoosh.
It's much harder not doing it with someone, the whoosh. Like,
All right.
it's very
Thank you, everyone.
complicated.
We'll see you next time on Key Talks.
Yay.
Bye.
Key Talks is a project of Key Creative. Our co-hosts are Paula Audrey Rivero and Deanna Halls. Our production team is Michael Schwake, Jessa Dupuis, and Deanna Halls. Music by John Rivero. To reach out to us or access services for you or your family, visit keycreative.com. That's QICreative.com and fill out our online intake form. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.